This week, Steve Tcherchian from XYPRO Technology will be here to talk about some mainframe security that will probably surprise you. Michael Bazell, of course, we've had him on the show before. He'll be back to talk about his new book. And in the security news, a bunch of stories that I didn't read that Larry will, and that's going to round out the segment. So you'll just have to stay tuned to see what those are, because I didn't read them. So all that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I totally introduce our host right now, but I've been a totally awkward boner.
What? Where? Oh, hey! I'm in the studio with you guys. That's kind of cool.
Sounds like a plan.
And we'll at least have one person listening.
That's right. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But you know,
actually built a new office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, third baby on the way, so I needed a new office.
Nice.
I lost my old office. That's now the baby room.
Brought to you by Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network.
Well, hello. Welcome to another wonderful Thursday evening with Security Weekly. I am fortuitous enough to be in the studio this evening, and I'm very excited about that. I am here to, and I have the pleasure to, introduce a man whose ego is only measured by the size of his USB dongle. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Asadorian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 548. It is February 15th, 2018. I guess you could call this our Valentine's Day edition, which makes it even more special to have Mr. Larry Pesce here next to me.
Should we be hugging?
Will you be my day after Valentine?
I don't know. What does it entail? What does it entail?
Oh,
does it entail anything with that deck of cards you showed me earlier? Or Johnny showed me earlier?
All that and more. Joff Thayer is here in studio.
Yes, I am. I actually...
it's an inside joke.
It is an inside joke? Yeah. Apparently. So, yeah, I accidentally landed in New England and stumbled my way to the G-Unit studios.
That's pretty much how I envisioned it happening, Joff.
So there you go.
And I think you hugged every waitress and hostess at every restaurant you stopped at along the way.
And that's different how?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's how you roll.
Well,
right.
you know,
the accent.
Yeah, I try.
It is, yeah. It is pretty sexy. On the lines via Skype, Carlos Perez. Carlos, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Happy to be here. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, my friend. How's things going, and how do you want to share with our audience anything that's been going on in your life, or no? It's up to you.
Not at this moment.
All right.
But stay tuned to my Twitter account next week.
Oh, there's a big announcement. I like how you drew in our audience to follow you on Twitter. That was crafty. I fully support that. Carlos, what is your Twitter handle so people can follow you on Twitter to get this big, I'm going to call it the big announcement.
Yeah, Carlos_Perez.
Oh, it's no longer Dark Operator?
It's never been Dark Operator.
That's just the blog.
A guy from Colombia has that one, and yeah, he has been getting a lot of followers.
But the blog, your website and the blog is darkoperator.com, right?
That's correct.
Excellent. But
Carlos_Perez.
Well, it's good to have you here, Carlos. So what do we got for announcements? On-demand training, securityweekly.com/on-demand. Actually just recorded an on-demand webinar today with Doug White on security training and awareness, and really how to manage your career with some great book recommendations. It'll be posted in the next couple of weeks, so make sure that you check out securityweekly.com/on-demand. That's all the announcements I have the patience for right now, so we'll get to the rest of them before the show concludes this evening. I would like to introduce Steve Tcherchian from XYPRO Technologies. Hopefully I said all that correctly. Steve is the Chief Information Security Officer and Director of Product Management for XYPRO Technology. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Good afternoon.
I should say, and also fellow Armenian, which is kind of a hack to get on the show. Is like if you're Armenian, you have a full pass. It's all good. We take care of each other. So,
right.
Steve, how did you get your start?
See a resemblance.
Yeah, right. Steve, how did you get your start in information security?
Started very early on, actually. Was very, very interested in technology back in 8, 9, 10 years old, destroying computers, pushing limits of what things can do. And then one of the things my dad told me is if you're good at something, never do it for free. So kind of blossomed and figured out what my path forward was, and started with a company called Earthlink Network. You might have remembered the ISP back in the days of AOL, Mindspring, Sprint. Started off with Earthlink, running some of their security groups, and then kind of evolved that position into a company called IGE, which had operations in the U.S., Hong Kong, and Shanghai, and ran essentially their SOC for that entire operation, and kind of just evolved from there. I do have to say, though, I started off on the other side of the line, but they say the best criminals make the best cops. So here I am now, kind of leveraging everything I've learned from that aspect of my life to everything I've done up to this point.
Fantastic. So, Steve, we started talking earlier, and you mentioned you did security for HP mainframes. And I had to be honest with you, I had either forgotten or never realized that HP had a line of mainframes. As when I hear mainframes, I think the other three-letter company that makes mainframes, but which we won't say here. But so tell us a little bit. I was fascinated, Steve, with the history behind the HP mainframe line. And I'm sorry, Carlos, did you have a question or something to add? I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah, was it the NonStop equipment tandem?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, Carlos.
I worked at HP for 11 years. So.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It started off as the old tandem computers back in the 70s, until Compaq acquired them in the late 90s, and HP acquired Compaq back in the early 2000s, and the tandem evolved into the HP NonStop. And yeah, a lot of people don't know about it, but it touches your life. It touches just about everybody's life every single day. Take out your wallet and look at the logos on the credit cards on your wallet or the other cards on your wallet. It's all of those are at some point or another running an HP NonStop in somewhere in that transaction path. A lot of telcos run NonStop. A lot of retailers, anywhere you shop on the weekend, you're likely touching a NonStop at some point. Stock exchanges, grocery stores. There's even a dairy that runs NonStop. I mean, these things handle anything from credit card processing to, like I said, stock exchanges to food and delivery service, travel, you name it. Any application that you need to stay online that's mission critical to your business, you're likely going to see that running on a NonStop.
Steve, what's some of the history behind the operating system? Obviously, it's not any kind of Unix derivative or other mainframe. Is it very specific to what that was Tandem?
Yeah, it's an operating system called Guardian. So it was developed by Tandem to be basically fault tolerant. So the entire concept of the NonStop or Tandem is no single points of failure. So everything comes in twos. That's why the name Tandem. You have two. If you have a UPS, you've got a second one. Every processor is coupled with a second one. Every disk drive, controller, cable, even the processes inside of the operating system are fault tolerant, where if one processor crashes, the other one can pick up all the processes running on that first processor. So the operating system is called the Guardian operating system. Been around, it's proprietary to the platform, and it's kind of evolved into a Unix-like personality over the last 10 or 15 years to allow easier adoption of newer technologies. So Guardian's the underlying operating system. There's a layer on top of it called OSS, Open Systems. I forgot the third letter, but basically gives you a Unix-like interface. You can run all of your modern applications that you can think of on any other platform on the NonStop, but then leverage all the fault-tolerant capabilities that the platform provides.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I remember doing demos back at work where in my old job where we would actually go into a client site and start pulling processors live and memory modules live on the system while it was still running and processing transactions and just replacing everything. And you could see the managers that were not too technical kind of freak out, like, but aren't you supposed to fail over that node? And go, no, it's a NonStop system. Don't worry. The name says it all, NonStop. And we would just pull the proc out, we just pull the memory out, and the system would keep running.
Yeah, I've been working on the platform for about 15 years now, close to 15 years now, but there's old timers in this business that have been there 40 years. They talk about, they'll have an earthquake or some other natural disaster knocking the entire cabinet over, and you'll have your other platforms, dead in the water, where the NonStop just keeps working. It's set up in a way where, it's pretty robust, where even a natural disaster which knocks the whole thing over keeps the machine functioning. One
demo in Vegas was one of the events was to actually shoot it. They started just putting rounds into it, and the machine wouldn't die.
I'd love to have been there.
So if you're going to mine some cryptocurrency and you want a super reliable and fast platform, that should be something you need to look into, right?
Absolutely. HP actually announced, or HP Enterprise actually announced their new kind of initiative on the NonStop platform is running blockchain technology. So they've ported R3 Corda onto the NonStop and moving forward with allowing you to do DLT on the NonStop now going forward.
How many people do you see targeting that platform? I know that almost every bank transaction, New York Stock Exchange, and many others actually run through NonStop systems, but I haven't seen a lot of attack code or anything out there focusing on it.
Yeah, for the longest time, it's been security through obscurity, as nobody really knew that these things existed. They were just that box in the corner that did that had handled its workload and did what it had to do. But over the course of the last 10, 15 years, as companies start acquiring other companies, and you get this next generation of CIOs and CISOs that want to look at their infrastructure and their platforms as kind of agnostic, saying, I don't want that system to be treated than any other way than my other systems, these things start getting a little more visibility. So they're becoming a little more prominent. People are becoming aware of them. There have been thankfully, there have been no reported breaches on the platform itself. It's got pretty robust security, and it needs to continue evolving. But it's one of those things that it's becoming more and more popular. It's no longer that box in the corner that does what it's supposed to do.
Steve, speaking of the security through obscurity, with the recent processor-style attacks of Spectre and Meltdown, and certainly branch prediction being something that most modern CPUs implement, although probably wishing they didn't today, for security reasons. Do you think the teams over at HP are looking at similar attacks? And if they aren't, how do we discover those style attacks on these platforms?
Yeah, good question. Actually, one of the things that are my focus areas right now is security intelligence and analytics, and kind of doing the market research on this. And I'm sure you guys are aware. The mean time to detection of a breach is 3 or 4 months right now, and on the higher side of that, it's almost 2 years. You give somebody that much time in your network, on your infrastructure, and they're going to be able to get into these systems and exploit whatever vulnerabilities exist, regardless of the platform, regardless of the security measures you've got in place. You give me that much time, and it's game over. But from a security perspective, though, is you've got quite a few vendors in the nonstop space that focus strictly on security. We're one of them. Some of our solutions come baked into the operating system. So you buy a nonstop, you're getting XYPRO solutions to help with your authentication and audits and other things. So the security, we realize that security is evolving on the nonstop and needs to continue evolving. Is what worked 15, 20 years ago is no longer going to be sustainable looking forward, especially as these systems become more integrated into the enterprise and connected to other platforms and other systems. So like I said, you give somebody enough time, they're going to figure out what to do. So it's just staying ahead of the curve and making sure that we're putting proper things in place to protect against that.
Steve, when I was working for university, we had an IBM mainframe or two, and it was kind of like that hands-off approach to any kind of testing or security. Maybe because they didn't have a nonstop, but just getting any access to the mainframe was, and I think you were in a similar situation, like just not like greatly frowned upon. Do you think it's still that way today, or do the mainframes require the similar level of assessment as our other IT systems?
I think they do to an extent. It's still kind of hands off. At least a lot of our customers are treat them that way. But as you start kind of globalizing your workforce and your staff starts shrinking down, you've got to adapt to your resources and allowing them to continue doing what they need to do to work on the systems and protect the systems. You don't have 20 people that can walk over into a data center or sitting inside of a data center and they get a request, they walk up to a console and do what they need to do. Now these systems are a lot more connected, which makes them a lot more vulnerable. Those areas where they can be exploited become much more prominent at that point. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's evolving where they're hands off, but they've got to keep up with the business need. There's more data being generated. These things are generating more data. They're consuming more data. Businesses are evolving. Requirements are evolving, and the platforms and the systems need to evolve with them. And it's no longer. I don't think it's sustainable to expect somebody sitting in a data center, grabbing a ticket, walking over to a console, and doing something. Connectivity's got to have to be part of your competitive advantage.
And not only that, but now the argument of security to obscurity is semi-dead. I remember a lot of banks have always trusted that for their SWIFT systems. Oh, nobody, unless they're inside banking, they're going to know about SWIFT. And now what we're seeing is a lot of attacks are specifically targeting SWIFT. We're seeing custom malware, custom tools, and it's just a matter of time before we start. And I've even seen code specifically for AS400s. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future we're going to see it for other platforms.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going back to what I said. You give somebody enough time on your network, in your infrastructure, and to them, that's regardless of the platform I'm targeting, it's just another endpoint. If I can get in, and especially if you're not following security best practices, let's say you've got Telnet open, and I get in, and I'm going to take my time and figure out what I'm dealing with, and get to what I need. It's no secret what these mainframes responsibilities are. They hold, in most environments, they hold crown jewels. So is being able to lock that down and stay ahead of that is paramount.
Well, I think too the couple of things changed over time that really make more things a target. One of course is the internet, and on a global scale, being able to share information, including things about proprietary systems and or how to hack into them. And then, of course, I think the other thing that changed that's big is virtualization and the ability. So can the processor, I guess my first question is, what's the architecture? And secondly, can you create a virtual environment for it without needing the hardware?
Yeah, well, HP's new initiative is actually virtualizing the operating system in the entire platform. So the virtualization capabilities exist, and all the inherent vulnerabilities that come with virtualizing a system come into play at that point. So yes, that's happening now, but we realize, and HPE realizes, that this is the way forward, is to kind of make it a little more cost effective to be able to obtain and take advantage of these systems for consumers. But also, like I said, it comes with all those vulnerabilities that exist on virtualizing something like this. I'm sorry, what was the question before that?
What's the processor architecture?
So for the longest time, it used to be Itanium. So they were relying on the Intel Itanium chips. And over the last 3 or 4 years, it's switched to x86. So they've moved to a normal, you would see in any other platform, is x86 processor. So with that comes all the other things that you can leverage with x86.
And I'm assuming you're talking 64-bit architecture as opposed to 32.
That's right. Yes.
Because that would make sense. Yeah. Given current standards.
Yeah, HP for a long time was the only vendor that was actually shipping Itanium processors, and due to the price of the Itanium and the low market and everybody moving and shifting to x64, they had to actually start switching to it. In fact, when we were talking about this type of targets, many people don't know, but Oracle actually built a version of the database of the RDMS that actually runs on this kind of system. So many times the same attacks that you would perform against an Oracle database, you can actually perform them against its platform. I remember a good friend of mine recently was, a couple of years ago, finished an installation in Trinidad, and he was actually installing Oracle RDBMS on those systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And HP's got their it's kind of hard transitioning from calling them HP to HPE, but Hewlett Packard Enterprise actually has their own flavor of an enterprise database solution called SQL MX that is, in similar to what Oracle does. Similar type of functionality. They've got a little bit of competitive advantage on the types of things they can do and the types of applications they can integrate with. But yeah, you can, I've heard instances where Oracle has been ported and running on those systems.
Is the risk more still sit with the applications, or Steve, do you believe that there's still kind of like operating system level stuff that hasn't really been explored because not too many people are looking at the security model, or maybe not?
I think the risk still lies with the application, because if you're running this platform, you're not running it because for a prestige symbol. You're running it because you need an application that needs to be fault tolerant and constantly available. With that comes all of the risk of running an application. 84% of vulnerability or breaches happen through the application layer. You have one developer that forgot to parameterize a query and game over. So they get into the application layer, but we're going to see, I feel we're going to continue seeing, you give somebody enough time, you're going to see those operating system and other architectural exploits as well. But for the most part on the NonStop, it's been protecting the application, protecting against insider threats and compliance issues, because these systems deal with the most sensitive types of data you can find in a company. Compliance becomes a big issue, and making sure you can monitor compliance and attest to compliance is a big driver for companies that use NonStop.
Is it easy or difficult compared to other kinds of systems to apply updates and patches to the operating system? And Oracle is going to be Oracle no matter where it's running. But the operating system, given its fault tolerance, is it pretty easy to apply maintenance and updates?
It's a relative term. I mean, you can train somebody, and after a couple of years, they might say it's easy. But somebody coming in with Windows or Linux experience is probably going to find it quite an uphill battle. You've got it's a specialized operating system, so you've got to know the types of commands and the subsystems and all the other different components that you're dealing with, and being able to know that you've got to back up these things before you apply this patch because it's going to affect these things this way. So, relatively speaking, I've been part of that process before. It took me a couple of years to get a full understanding of what it is I'm dealing with when I'm patching systems.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is a far-flung challenge from just clicking on update now.
Right, on Windows, yeah.
Or sudo apt-get update, sudo apt-get upgrade on
BSD. This kind of made me wonder, I think that, Paul, you were alluding to this, and that is, if the operating system hasn't really been exposed to the level of scrutiny because it's back in a closet somewhere, it's isolated, are we going to see an effect from researchers actually being able to access it as it gets virtualized, as it comes out into the community a little bit?
I think so, and you're getting a lot of auditors also that are getting wise to it. Whereas you go through a PCI audit, and you get your check marks, and they go, oh, what's this box over here? Oh, it's a NonStop. Okay, well, we don't know anything about it, but here's your certification. Now they're getting a lot more wiser, and you're getting auditors that actually know the NonStop and understand the NonStop and want to see processes and procedures that you're doing to stay compliant on a NonStop. So that's becoming more and more of an issue and an activity that NonStop users are having to deal with, is making sure that they can demonstrate their compliance and their security.
Steve, is HP applying security to this platform, and at like what level? Like, do you feel like they're not paying enough attention to the security, or given recent times and operating systems and Microsoft especially going through the transition of really secure coding practices, do you see HP adopting some of these similar security practices and applying them to the platform?
Absolutely. I'm very, very close to that process, working along with HPE, and I see them giving security the utmost of attention. So I think it's getting the right level of attention. They're staying ahead of the threats. They're staying when vulnerabilities get announced, they're all over it, just like any other security vendor or hardware vendor. So yeah, it is getting the right amount of attention.
So it ships with a secure shell or equivalent out of the box?
Yes, it does. So there are security components that come baked into the operating system, and nice. Yeah, you've got your traditional encryption and SSH and other secure communication protocols. Absolutely.
Yeah, back in the day, IBM mainframes, it was Telnet and it was EBCDIC encoded. Yeah, I think I've told that story several times on the show before.
I was about to say that is secure shell's probably there, but don't forget to turn off Telnet.
Right.
And actually, one of our testers recently actually asked me a question. It's and I won't tell you which tester it was. He came across a system that was responding in what he thought was gibberish, and I said, "Have you considered it might be EBCDIC?" And
he asked, "What's that?"
Yeah.
You know all that means, Joff?
I'm old.
Yep.
Right.
So who was the tester?
We'll discuss that.
We'll discuss that
later.
Because they're clearly young.
Steve,
yes, younger.
Does HP produce security documentation with it? Do they have security recommendations, hardening guides, and such for this platform?
Absolutely. There's a fantastic one called the HP NonStop Hardening Guide, which XYPRO contributed to extensively. So yeah, they have the best practices of how, when you obtain one of these systems, how to secure them. And to that point is what I mentioned earlier, is a lot of XYPRO software comes baked into the operating system. So where you have authentication, an authentication mechanism, our software will extend the capabilities of that authentication mechanism, allowing you a lot more granular controls of what you can do, integration with Active Directory, LDAP, and other things. So all of that is part of best practices of securing a NonStop system, is making sure that you are leveraging the proper authentication mechanism, you are auditing activity, keystroke logging, your operators, commands, and all of that. It's a fantastic guide. Again, it's called the HP NonStop Hardening Guide. Covers just about everything to set you up with a good baseline when you take control of one of these systems.
So if there are security professionals listening today that know that they have an HP NonStop and maybe haven't had the security conversation, I guess first, how should they approach that situation? And then secondly, like, can you teach us some of the lingo? Like, what is some basic lingo we would need to have that conversation, right?
Sure, you're going to hear terms like safeguard, and you're going to hear terms like CLIM, and you're going to hear terms like NSC. And the first time I heard these, I'm scratching my head, going, "What the hell are you guys talking about?" None of this makes any sense to me. But just as a kind of a primer to what those things are, so the operating system is called Guardian, which has a security subsystem called Safeguard. So Safeguard is your authentication controls and your access controls and other types of security parameters that you would set on a system. And then you'll hear terms like CLIM. CLIM is on the NonStop system. A CLIM is they've offloaded the disk I/O and the network I/O to additional appliances that are not connected that are connected to the system. So it's a clustered I/O module is what they call it. Which handles like I said, disk and network I/O. And then you've got, just like with any other mainframe, you've got a console, a Windows console that you can do most of your management from. So you can apply patches through this Windows console. You can do other types of things through the Windows console, and that's called the NSC.
Oh, Steve froze there for a moment. Hopefully he comes back. So, sorry, Steve, we lost you at NSC.
Okay. Yeah, NSC is the Windows console that's connected to the platform to allow you to patch the system, perform upgrades, other types of maintenance activity, down CPUs, swap over CPUs, those types of things.
So, my first thought as this thing gets more heterogeneous in its deployment model, my first thought is that sounds like a really juicy target to exploit. Right, especially as you're talking about distributing I/O.
Now we're drawing attention to it, Geoff.
Oh my goodness!
Make sure you have permission, please.
Yes, always get
reminder
permission.
to our listeners: always have permission when you're hacking anything, especially.
Just think of this: almost every bank uses it for ATM transactions. They get processed through that. The
I don't think
New York Stock Exchange uses it to process transactions also.
Yeah. So so that actually begs a question: the networking for these distributed systems that are attached to this thing. Surely these are physically isolated channels that are not associated with any of the front end networking.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The only access to them is through the CPU itself. So there's no way to get to them any other way.
So AirGapping, meaning a network with very high latency.
So true.
So true.
That's one I stole from Ed Scotus. Shout out to Ed.
Steve, have you seen any attacks or participated in any incident response activities with this platform?
I personally haven't seen, like I said, there haven't been any publicized attacks of the platform. Anything beyond that, I can't really talk about, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
But, yeah, it's as far as the platform goes, most of the attacks and the compromises have been upstream.
Yeah.
But as the perimeter kind of starts shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, we can't be ignorant to say that, well, it's never going to be on this platform. So we have to make sure that the right security, configuration, tools, and everything else are in place to prevent it, because we never want to be in that. We don't want to be the ones in the headlines.
So you did mention some Active Directory integration as part of the system. In some deployment models. Now, pen testers such as myself, more recently, actually not so recently even, consider Active Directory kind of the highway to exploitation, right? So is there concerns that you have with respect to how customers are deploying as it pertains to integration of Active Directory?
Absolutely. One of the things I stand on my soapbox and scream about is, Active Directory just by itself isn't good enough. Is making sure that you do have multi-factor authentication enabled on these things, because, Active Directory, like you said, is going to be the highway to a lot of these compromises. And credentials get compromised from Active Directory, it could mean game over for any other platform that they're connected to. So it's imperative to make sure that multi-factor authentication is enabled on these systems, because a lot of the time you're going to find these systems within PCI scope. They're going to be within the card data environment because they're holding credit card information. And PCI-ISA dictates that any system that has access to this type of data needs to be protected with multi-factor authentication. So to your point, is making sure that they are secured properly to make sure an Active Directory exploit doesn't bring down the whole thing.
Yes, I was just about to say that if we had Jeff Mann on the show right now, we would say Q Jeff, because you said the acronym PCI, but Jeff's not here, so we can't Q Jeff.
We can't talk. We can't talk about PCI.
Jeff's not here, man.
He's just not here. We can. This cannot be done.
Any other questions for Steve?
Negative Batman. Negative Ghost Rider.
Steve, parting thoughts. Some free resources that your company has if people want more information. I know you put there are some links in the show notes, but
yeah, we do a lot of thought leadership articles. We've got a great Twitter, so if you follow us at XYPRO Technology, XYPRO spelled XYPRO Technology. There's always some great articles, great commentary. Follow our LinkedIn page, and follow me. I do a lot of tweeting and a lot of information sharing and thought leadership. So mine's at Steve Tcherchian. The last name's going to be hard to spell, but it's TCHERCHIAN.
the T is silent in Armenian.
Yeah.
I don't really know if that's true.
It's an Armenian thing.
I'm Armenian, so I can speak with some authority, even if I'm just making stuff up.
That's what I say about Australians, too.
So, Steve, just 5 final silly questions. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Let's do it.
3 words to describe yourself.
Dynamic, loud, and fun.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Nunchucks.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Nobody Loves Me More Than Me.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I always let others go first.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Oh my God.
This is the only one he hasn't thought about.
You know, Britney Spears and Jennifer Aniston.
Ooh,
damn! I like that. Wow.
There you go.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Wow. I gotta go. I gotta do a thing.
I do live in California, guys.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly tonight.
Thank you, guys.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back, and have another interview. How about that? Stay tuned.
Nice.
Woohoo.